Sometimes you make things on the 3D printer that nobody but you know what they're really for. I wonder what this one's for. Good morning, everybody, and welcome to my weekly vlog for January the 11th, 2021. It is vlog number 200, or it's the 306th day of COVID. And it's kind of amazing that this is my 200th episode. If there's 52 weeks in a year, that means that I have done almost 4 years worth of vlogs. And if you're one of the people that's been with me since the beginning, thank you. How did you manage? And just another note here. This is my second version of today's vlog. I just wasted an hour. I thought my microphone was plugged in properly. I usually do a test before I start, and I did this morning. But in the process of doing that test, I must have somehow not made the connection with my microphone plug and into the iPad that I actually record this on. And so I have all this footage with absolutely no sound. Now, don't say it. I know some of you would think I'd rather look at you than listen to you. That might be a bit of a compliment too. But anyways, hopefully this works this time. Now I have to repeat everything I said before, which... okay, good thing I have my notes. Maybe I'll be a little bit more condensed this time. I don't know. So, let's jump right into my grandmother's quilt. You've seen it. I've shown it. I now have it completely finished. I layered it and I quilted it. It's done and it looks good, I think, and I'm really happy with it. But you don't see it hanging up behind me right now. And that's because it is so big and so heavy that I thought I would do a video and show you how it compares to the original one that my grandmother did. So I'm going to insert that video in here right now. My grandmother made me the brown and peach quilt in the late 70s or very early 80s. It was from a design she drew out on cardboard, colored in with pencil crayons, then cut the fabric with scissors. She did not use a rotary cutter. Used probably polyester fabric because printed cotton was not widely available at the time, then hand-pieced and hand-quilted the entire quilt. I hated the colors. It's a beautiful quilt, and the work that went into it is astounding, but the color scheme is one of my least favorites. However, this quilt hung on a wall in our first house until we moved into the home we are now in. The problem with the house that we now occupy is that there is not enough wall to hang this quilt on, and the colors do not go with our decor. So the quilt, unfortunately, was put away on a top shelf in a closet, and there it has sat for almost 25 years. At the time this took place, I was not a quilter and did not have the appreciation I have today for the art of quilting. So I dug it out of the closet and decided to remake this quilt according to my grandmother's hand-drawn pattern, but this time I did it in my favorite colors, which are blues. I also use the technology that's available to a 21st century quilter. Rotary cutters, machine applique, domestic machine quilting. Yes, I quilted this on a domestic, not a long arm, and I'm pleased with my result. Now the original and my redo version of my grandmother's quilt rest side by side on my guest room bed. My grandmother's quilt is no longer in the closet. So the original quilt measures 76 by 96 inches, and my redo measures 68 by 89. It's a little smaller, but I chose not to put prairie points on my version. I wanted a more modern version. Overall, this was a very personal experience, and I have paid homage to my grandmother's sewing abilities, quilting abilities, and now the two quilts exist side by side on my guest room bed. So, as I said in the video, those two quilts now rest side by side on my guest bed as an homage to my grandmother. So behind me is the next project that I've just started working on. Now, I actually started working on this a lot back about 2 years ago or so when I came back from my last trip to Australia. And in that trip, I bought some appliques of animals that are native to Australia. This was the first one that I did, and I did this back, well, right after I got back from that trip pretty much. And it was also my first real attempt at machine applique as well, which, yeah, go big or go home kind of a thing. So it turned out pretty good, but there I've had it sitting for 2 years because I have 3 more of these different animals. And my idea then was that I would do all 4 of these, and these are pretty big. They're about 20 inches by 20 inches, so they're a big block, and I was going to put 4 of them into this quilt. Then I've rethought that. If I put 4 of those into one quilt, that's the quilt. It doesn't leave a lot of room for using the other fabrics that I bought. So I have rethought that, and now I'm just doing one. This will be the center of the quilt. And I've made these smaller ones. Now remember I showed you that I was making or experimented with some 3D printed templates that did a star in a circle in a square. And then I redeveloped that using my technology because basically I didn't want to sew curves. And I used the sewing tool, the circular sewing tool for my sewing machine, which is what I used for my grandmother's quilt as well. So I created this block. I'm actually going to make 12 of these blocks. They will be in the 3 colors of blue, red, and white, which are the colors of the Australian flag. And the star in the center is a 7-star or 7-pointed star, and it's called a Federation star. And the Federation star on their flag, I think the 7 points represent the 7 states in Australia. And so that's what I'm doing. And then I had a program that has all these different Aussie animals that I bought some time ago. So I thought it would be nice to put a different Aussie animal in the center of each one of these blocks. Here's another one with a koala. And I need to make 12 of these. So some of them are going to have the colors a little bit reversed. They'll all have the white star, but some of them will have a red square and a blue circle in them as well. And these are going to border this piece, which I have up here. So 3 of them will run down. It'll be blue, red, blue, down the sides and across the top. And luckily, mathematically, this works out perfect. I don't have to add any sashing or coping strips to this. I thought I would have at the beginning to make it all fit, but I don't. That was just a serendipitous thing that happened, basically. Now it does leave me with a blank up here where that line will come across and that line comes down. I'll have a square up here, but no problem. I'm going to put a white square in there, and I also have on the same file with the Aussie animals, I have the Aussie flag with an animal in front of it. So there'll be one of those in each one of the corners, and I just happen to have 4 different patterns for that. So that will be the center part of the quilt. And then from there I'll use my Aussie fabrics, probably doing sort of star-like motifs throughout the rest of the quilt. And that's how I'm going to design this particular one. I will show you it as time progresses. So that's my latest project. Now I'm going to have to put this project though on hold again for a bit because this week I really want to grab one of my UFOs, unfinished object, and get it quilted. They've been hanging in my sewing room for way too long. It's time to get on with the quilting of them. So that's my plan for this week. Okay, so that takes us to the YouTube channel of the week. Last week was about one that's about comedy, and this week is also about comedy because don't we need a laugh or two during this time? Yeah, we do. And Sara Millican is the name of this comedian. She's Irish, works out of the UK, of course, and she's hilarious, absolutely hilarious. So I thought I would talk a little bit about her YouTube channel. This week's YouTube channel is another one that's going to really make you laugh. And it's by a comedian from the United Kingdom. I believe she's Irish in background, and her name is Sara Millican. And she is outrageously funny. And what I mean by outrageously funny is that many of her topics that she talks about are very personal to her. I think they're probably somewhat embellished, but they're somewhat shocking because they are topics you don't expect someone to talk about on stage. And that's where the humor lies. It takes you unawares. It shocks you, and it's funny, very, very funny. So if you want a really good laugh, check out Sara Millican. Okay, so the link to Sara Millican is in the show notes below. There's a link for my latest Idiot Quilter. And there is a link to something I'm going to talk about later, which is one of my reviews. I'm done with the books now, so now I'm moving into podcasts and websites. So there's a link for that one. As I said, we'll talk about that further. And there's a link to this past week's Stephen and Walter Live. Now, I want to say something about Stephen and Walter Live, and this is I'm trying not to make this into a rant, because I have one of those later on. During Stephen and Walter Live, well, first of all, you know that Stephen and Walter Live is basically chit-chat. I do have a theme each week, but lately we never get to the theme. We just end up going off on tangents, and that's fine. I think it makes it more interesting that way anyways. But of course, there are some topics that come up from week to week that I really feel compelled to talk about. And of course, the biggies lately has been COVID, but also the real big one is what's happening in the United States right now as they move towards the inauguration of Biden. And that's just disgusting, what's happening there and the whole bit. And our hearts go out to those Americans because of the pain and suffering that these yahoos are putting you through. And hopefully it'll all turn out all right. But while we were discussing this, and that's a fairly serious discussion, and it's not a cheerful discussion, okay, I will admit that. There were a couple of people that I think were a little bit PO'd with me because I wasn't being happy. Have you ever known me to be happy? I'm not that kind of person. I am not a warm, fuzzy person. I'm sorry, okay? That's just me. And I'm not even going to fake warm and fuzzy because I can't. I'm one of those kind of people that if you get a compliment from me, you know it's sincere because I don't make them very often. I don't just go around throwing kind words out to everybody for the sake of throwing kind words out. If I say something that's kind or warm and fuzzy, you know I really, really mean it because it's so rare. Okay? Again, that's just me. So somebody tried to divert me from the topic because they didn't want us to talk about that because, you know, that's upsetting. That makes us all feel bad. Yeah, I know, I'm sorry. It does. But actually, I'm not sorry. I'm not going to be apologetic for my opinions. My channel, my opinions. People are free to chime in with theirs, and if it's constructive, we go with it. But I'm not going to be fake. I'm not going to make apologies for what I think. So I said a few things. Okay, I qualified them and whatever, but they weren't cheery, happy thoughts. So I think there may have been a couple of people that decided at that point they'd had enough and off they went. And that is fine. That is absolutely fine. If you don't like my content, if you don't like what I say, and I've said this before, you don't have to stick around. No one's twisting your arm, okay? If you can get something that makes you feel warm and fuzzy inside from somewhere else on the YouTube, you go right ahead and do that. If that fills your need, then do it. If I'm not filling your need, I don't take any offense. Drop me like a hot potato. Okay? That's fine. But don't try and tell me how I'm supposed to be because I'm too old to change, for one thing. Old dogs, all that kind of stuff. And two, it is still my channel. I put my time and my effort into this. And if you get something out of it, then that's great because that's my intention. And if you don't like it, find somebody else to watch. I do. If I see something on YouTube, I don't complain about it. I just turn it off and go to something else. It's not a big deal, really. So anyways, I just thought I'd bring that up because I think if you watch the replay of it, there'll be a couple of moments where I get a little heated. Okay? And really, I'm more heated with the situation. I'm not heated about the persons or people who might be, that got me into that mood. It's not their fault, okay? They can't change who they are either. So that's okay. All right, enough said about that. Let's move right on to, what's really pissing me off this week. Now, when I thought about this topic, and what I'm going to talk about now, I've had to add to it a little bit of a change because of something that happened. So let me say, I started this by titling it, Let's Leave the Old People to Die. And the reason I said that, one, just to catch your interest, but two, because that's what our provincial government has been doing with our elderly people that are in long-term care facilities. And of course, I have a personal connection to that because my mother, you know, is in a long-term care facility. Now, this problem that our government has with the way they treat our elderly is not something that has just happened because of COVID. This has been going on for quite a while. Our government doesn't put the resources, meaning the money and the personnel that they need to put in there to look after our elderly adequately. Actually, they shouldn't be treated adequately. They deserve to be treated much better than just adequately, because look at how much they've contributed to our society, what they have done for us, the generation that came before us. So they deserve to be treated with respect, and at this point in their lives, they should be treated in such a way that keeps them happy and healthy and respects them. But our government doesn't do that. No, not at all. Our government decided it's a really good idea to let private corporations run LTCs. We have ones that are not for profit. That's what my mother's in, and that one's fine. But the ones that are for profit are in it for profit, and all they do is they see old people as ka-ching, ka-ching money. And this is one reason why COVID has run rampant through these long-term care facilities right now because of that. They don't hire enough people to look after the people in there well. They don't pay those people a decent wage for what they do, and they work damn hard. So that's all on the government's back. And the government has come under criticism, severe criticism, from many different sources since COVID has started. And the government has made promises, like what the governments always do. They make promises that they don't keep, of course, and this government is no different. And I'm talking about the provincial government led by Doug Ford, the Conservative Party in Ontario. And yeah, they keep saying, oh, they're going to do this and they're going to do that and whatnot. One of the things they've recently come under severe criticism for is that the speed of getting vaccines into the arms of the people in the LTCs. We've got the vaccine now. We're getting them in. They've started their plan, which is not really a good plan because they really don't know what they're doing. I mean, they put the military in charge of organizing how the vaccines are going to be distributed. Well, really? They put in a retired general who's got a specialization in logistics? Well, maybe he knows about moving guns around and men around, but does he know anything about moving vaccines around? I don't think so. I think they just picked him so he would be the public figurehead to take all the blame when things don't go well. When things go right, however, you won't even hear about him. It'll be all Doug Ford and his party. With that, the Premier of Ontario. But things haven't been going that well in the distribution of it, and they've come under criticism for the lack of speed and efficiency in getting the vaccine to the frontline workers, the healthcare workers, and to the people in LTCs. Those are the people that should be getting it first. And I most certainly do support that because they're the most vulnerable. We need the frontline healthcare workers for obvious reasons. And the people in nursing homes, their immunity is down. They, if they get a cold, it could mean death. So yeah, they need to have it. But they've done a very piss-poor job, quite frankly, of getting their act together, the government, for distributing this vaccine. And so, basically they're just giving them a death sentence. It's like they have no value to society, so they can wait. We'll just throw them on the back burner. And that's the attitude this government has had even before COVID about our elderly. And although they make all these promises and they're going to do better, they're definitely not proving they're doing better with how they're getting out the vaccine to the LTC people. That's what I was going to talk about, and I guess I just have. However, there's a new wrinkle, a more positive one. we got a call late yesterday from my mother's nursing home stating that everybody had just gotten the first shot at her nursing home. That the local hospital have come in and administered it, and in 3 weeks' time they'll come in and administer the second shot. Wow, that came out of the blue. Did not expect that. Did not expect that my mother was going to get the shot that soon. So something is working. So good. That means maybe the government is taking things more serious. Maybe they are listening to the advocates for the treatment of elderly people. I would like to think that. I don't really believe it, but the bottom line is my mother's got her first shot, and that is a great weight off my shoulders. I am very happy about that. I'll see how she feels about it when I talk to her on Tuesday. But anyways, that's what my rant was today, was about how we treat the elderly. And when I say we, I mean our government treat the elderly. Because, you know, eventually I'm going to be there. I hope not for a long, long time, but I'm not getting any younger. And, you know, I want to be looked after. I deserve to be looked after. Okay, I've paid my dues. I've paid my taxes, the whole bit. I deserve to be looked after, not to be cast aside as this, well, you're old, you're useless, die. Okay, so that takes us now to product review updates, actually. An update on the little elf cameras, the ones I showed you that I bought that were like really inexpensive and work really, really well. And I showed that last week. Well, I did also mention I have one problem with those cameras, and that problem is that the little micro SD card that goes into them doesn't seem to work. And I tried everything, and I contacted the company, and they gave me some tips and tricks for that, and I just could not get it to work. So I decided to order a couple of new SD micro cards that I thought might work in it. And I got them from Amazon. They were like 25 bucks for a package of two, 32 gigabyte size little cards. These little things right here. Okay. And I got them and I tried them and they didn't work. So I thought, okay. But I have two more of those cameras. So I got thinking about it. Well, maybe it's the camera itself. Try one of the other ones and see what happens. Nope, same thing. Didn't work. So I'm trying to figure this out. Well, you know, if you've ever used these little cards, usually when they slip into a device, there's sort of a spring action inside. And so you push it in and it sort of clicks into place. And then when you want to take it out, you push it in again and it pops out. Mine wasn't popping. That camera was not popping. And I got thinking, maybe this thing isn't sitting in there properly. So I thought, well, let's try a different camera again. So I'm playing around with it, same problem, but then I realized if I pushed it in really all the way, I would hear the click and it would stay in there. And yes, it worked. So I tried it on the camera that I've actually got set up that I'm using with my 3D printer, and the same thing. Well, great. Hallelujah, it works. Yeah, try and get the card back out because it goes in so far, there is none of it hanging outside of the device itself that you can get your hands on, your fingers on, and pull back out. That's a problem. I tried everything. I thought at one point I was never going to get the card out again. With a lot of basically prying, sticking my fingernails in as far as I could get, even using tweezers. It's the only way I could get it out. So I'm not happy about that. So I thought I should let the company know. So I did, just to see what kind of reaction I would get. I also told them in that message that I was going to add to my review, that I'd already written a glowing review for them on Amazon. I was going to add this to my review, that this is the problem. Your camera is great, but if you want to record anything on an SD microcard, it sucks. I got an answer back from them. This was an answer that any other answers I've had from them have been they usually start with the same phrase. Dear customer, so sorry that you're having a problem. It's in broken English, by the way, because these things come from China. All electronics do. And So they wrote back and said, yeah, they would let their engineers know. Because I suggested they should redesign, or the next time when they're upgrading their cameras or whatever, that they keep that in mind and change the design. So really, I got pushed to the side, which means basically they know that there's a problem there and they don't have any real plans at the moment to fix it. And the problem I have with all of that too is that anything that you get from China these days in electronics seems to be piecemealed. It's put together with old technology and new technology, and they try to blend the two. Whatever's probably cheaper, because they did the same thing with the 3D printer when it came to the way the interface works on it, and the and even the SD card system that's on it. So yeah, beware when you buy electronics from China, which you have really no choice in the matter. You may run into problems like this. Things may not work the way you expect them to work. Now, it's not a biggie for me with these cameras. I just want it to be able to record to SD memory card because I would have liked to have recorded while my 3D printer was printing and then be able to transfer it to my computer and put it into some software that would speed it up at an incredible speed because, one, it's cool to watch those when they're like that. Just go on YouTube and you'll see lots of examples of what I'm talking about. And two, it takes to print something, hours and hours. Many of my projects take 10 to 18 hours to print. So, if I could do this and really condense it down, that would have been a benefit. But it's not a major thing for me. So I will live with the cameras because their quality, besides, forget about the SD card, are great, are really great. So anyways, that was what's new. And I also bought, along with those SD cards, I bought an SD card reader. I had one of these before. I can't find it anywhere. This one has two ends to it, your standard USB and then your USB-C. And on one side you put in a full-size SD card, and on the other side is for the minis. So I can plug it into my computer and away it goes. My computer does not have a card reader built into it, not the one I have right now. One of my older computers did have that in it. I don't know if that's something they're not putting into computers these days, sort of like they got rid of DVD drives in them. I don't know, but anyways, that solves the problem, and these things are inexpensive. I think it was $10 or something like that. Okay, that's all that I've bought that's really new. So that takes us to what I want to review this week. Now, I'm out of books. I finally, after 2 years, have gone through all of my books. So now I thought I'd share some of the podcasts and websites that I go to frequently. While I'm sewing, I often listen to a podcast, and I have a variety of them. Some that are humorous, some that deal with LGBTQ issues, some that deal with quilting, and others that deal with art making. And one of those that deals with art making is by a very famous person in the mixed media world, and that's Julie Fafay Balzer. And she's been running this podcast for a long time. She does it with her co-host, who happens to be her mother, and it's extremely informative. Now, I think it comes out, her schedule seems a little irregular on these. Sometimes it comes out every other week, sometimes it's once a month. I've never figured it out. But it's called Adventures in Arting. And I have put a link in the show notes to the web page that you can find where to link up to the podcast for it. Or if you listen to podcasts through iTunes, you can just simply do a search in the iPod or in the iTunes store for Adventures in Arting, and you'll find it. They're very, very informative. She talks about art from various points of view. She talks about it from her own creations. She talks about it from techniques. She interviews sometimes people who are in the mixed media world. She talks about art as, from the commercial aspect of it as well. So I find it always very, very informative. And the banter between her and her mother is very entertaining as well. So it's a great podcast. So if you have never checked this out, go to it. If you listen to podcasts, I think you'll enjoy it. It's very, very good. Okay, So that was my review this week. And now I turn to the 3D corner. What have I been making on my 3D printer? Well, I've been making boxes. You'll say boxes? Yes, boxes. This box. This is what I've been making. Now, I did buy some wood filament. Yes, you can get filament that looks like wood. And actually, this little thing that I made this on the 3D printer as well to hold these little micro cards. It looks like marble because I bought some filament that looks like marble. So it looks like stone. And actually, as an aside, this has a cover as well that I made, and I put the cover on. I couldn't get the cover off. There's a little bit of a flaw in this program. Now, I didn't design these. I get these off of Thingiverse, and I don't know if it was because I used marble filament as opposed to just your plain ordinary solid color filament that's why I couldn't get the lid off. Walter finally got it off. I gave up, and he finally got it off, but I'm not putting it back on because I want to be able to get at my cards. In fact, I'm not really sold on this particular little holder for these micro cards. There's other designs, and I think I may eventually print one of those other designs and try it out. But back to my box with wood filament. Does it look like wood? Well, no. It looks like plastic wood. But that's okay. I kind of figured it would, but I thought I'd give it a try. So what is this? Well, you know that I get a lot of ATCs from my art journaling group ladies because they love to do ATCs. I don't, but they do, but they always very generously make me one as well. And I have shown those to you over the weeks, you know, when I get new ones, and I put them up on my bulletin boards in my craft room. But the bulletin boards are full. So what am I going to do with future ones? Well, I need something to store them in, but I also wanted something where I could leaf through them because I do find them inspiring. And they give me ideas for other projects as well. So I thought something like this that holds cards that people use in games like Dungeons and Dragons and other things like that. And on Thingiverse, where I get a lot of my 3D print files, there's all kinds of these. So I found one I liked, this one, and I downloaded it, and I had to adjust though the measurements because it wasn't quite the right size to hold an ATC, because ATCs are 2.5 inches by 3.5 inches. Of course, the problem is when you alter a design, these are all in metric. I don't think in metric. I mean, we've had metric in Canada since I went to high school. But I've never been comfortable thinking in metric. I think of everything in linear, you know, inches, feet, yards. Actually, I think in meters. But anything smaller than a meter, I have trouble with. So you could tell me this is a millimeter and I'd believe you. And that's the problem. So I knew I needed to adjust this. So I did some conversion from linear to metric. Thought I had the right dimensions. 8 hours later, this box was finished printing and doesn't fit. Well, it does sort of fit, but it's a little tight. So I went in, adjusted the measurement again by what I thought would do it. No, it didn't. The fourth version I got right. Okay, I'm a dummy when it comes to measurements. As simple as that. Here, oops. Get some things stuck in there. Here's the final version. The ATC card fits in this very nicely. Now you're going to say, but that doesn't look like wood. Yeah, it is. It's the same filament I used for this one, except I am in the process of decorating this. And I've just put a layer of what has a steampunk look to it of tissue paper. And that's all on the edges of this. Now I'm not finished with this. I'm going to do some other things to it. But I also made some dividers. Again, when I was making these, I think this was the third set that I made because the other ones just didn't fit in the box that well. Now these are just plain color. I'm going to do something to those, you know, alter it. Maybe cover it in some more of this tissue paper or do some other kind of treatment to it. But this will become my ATC box when I get it done. So, another use for a 3D printer. Now, I am sure you're going to say, yeah, really? 3D printing, it seems all you do is make boxes. Yeah, I do lately. I like boxes. In fact, I have a plan to create some organizing boxes for a desk drawer that holds all my 3D printer supplies. And there, believe it or not, there are plans you can download for those kind of things. So that's a plan for later on today to start on that. It's going to take a while. But yes, it is a toy. Okay? It is a toy for big boys. I love it. I love to play with it. I learn a lot from it. And yes, I'm never going to be able to do this on a commercial level and make big bucks from it. And that's not what it's designed for. It's designed for a hobbyist and to play. And so I'm playing with it, and I make no apologies for it because I love to play. Okay, so that's all I want to say this week on the 3D Corner. So let's move to current project, which involves a 3D printed box. Again, as I told you, I like boxes. And I've started another series on a work in progress. This is an album box, and I'm trying to meld together two worlds, the world of 3D printing with my world of mixed media. And so this is part one of this little 6x6 Altoid style album box. Now, as you know from my 3D Corner segments in the past couple of weeks, that I do have a 3D printer. So what I'm going to try to do is sort of merge 3D printing technology with mixed media to create something. Now, what I have in mind is to create an altered Altoid tin, but I'm going to make the tin on the 3D printer, and I'm going to add some steampunk elements like gears and keys and things like that, also 3D printed, to the top to embellish it. And I want to make this the size that will hold a 6x6, maybe an accordion fold, maybe a stitched little album, which will all be done as well in the steampunk theme. So this is a bit of an experiment to see if I can put together the world of mixed media with the world of 3D printing. So I think the first thing I need to do is print out the actual Altoid style box. I call it an Altoid box style because I have to increase the dimensions of it from an original Altoid box. And on top of that, it's not made of tin, it'll be made of plastic. So let's see what I can do. So here's the tin base all done. I guess I shouldn't call it a tin base, it's plastic base. This took 17 hours to print. So it's done, it came out, it's flawless, which is great, which means all my settings on the 3D printer were primed properly. And over on the 3D printer right now, I have now the tin top, the Altoid tin top, and it's going to probably take almost as many hours. It's not quite as deep, so it might take a little less, but it's still going to take a long time. So the lid for this box is finally printed, and here it is. And it took almost as long as the base did. It's a little less plastic in it, but it took at least about 13 or 14 hours to print. But now I have my modified Altoid tin box that will fit a 6x6 album. Now, I think I probably should have made this a little higher to get a thicker one in, but this will be probably a prototype. And after I do the album in this, I can make that decision as to, for the next one, if I want to make that bigger. Of course, if I make that a little higher, it's going to take longer to print. So you can see this is not a fast process. So with my 3D printer, I've printed out a whole bunch of gears and steampunky-like elements, this butterfly, this pocket watch, and I'm going to put those, some of those, on top of the box lid for this 6x6 album Altoid style box. And of course I printed it in orange, but I'm going to change that with the paint pouring, which I'm going to do in just a couple of minutes. And I may print out a few other
interesting embellishments that I have as well. I have some keys and things like that that I think will add an interesting dimension to the top. So I'm going to paint pour on the top of this lid. So I've got my paints mixed up. I've got 4 different colors, and I'm going for sort of a antique look. So I've mixed some brown, some very dark red, some yellow, and a little white in these cups that have the stir sticks hanging out of them. And I also use pouring medium right here as well to make them even a little bit more fluid. These are fluid acrylics as well by Golden. And now I'm going to dump a little bit of each one of these into this empty cup over here and then pour it on my top. And you notice I've got a rack on here so it can all drip down through onto my no-stick craft sheet. Okay, so I've poured my paint, and actually right now it's of course very, very wet, but I think it's looking really quite nice just from this. Now this paint will spread out a little bit more, and it's going to alter a little bit, and it's going to take a while to dry. I like to leave it for, well, overnight anyways, if not a full 24 hours. And then we'll come back to it and move on.
So next week, part 2. And now that takes us to events in the past week. And I usually start with giving you an update on my mother, and she is fine. And you know that she's had the first vaccine shot, and that's great. She did have a little boo-boo this week. I got a phone call at the end of the week, I guess when they were pushing my mother from one location to another location in her wheelchair. They went through a door arch and her elbow got bumped and it scraped it a little bit. And in my mother's case, bruises and scrapes are very easy. Her skin is very thin. It doesn't take much. Nothing major. They put a little disinfectant on it, threw on a Band-Aid. She's fine, no pain, everything is great. But they do have to, by law, have to contact me to let me know of any of these things, no matter how minor they are, that they have happened, which I appreciate. It also protects them, so you're not thinking they're, you go and, not that I'm able to right now, but if, on a FaceTime, I looked at her arm and said, hey, how come you've got that on you? What did they do to you? Did they take you outside and whip you? Which they don't do. They look after her very, very well, as you've heard me say before. But anyways, they let me know about that, so that's fine. But I can understand how that would happen too, because when my mother first got into a wheelchair and I had to push her around, first of all, pushing a wheelchair is not easy. It takes a little getting used to steer it, okay? The other thing is my mother had this tendency to let things hang out of the wheelchair. My father did the same thing when he was in a wheelchair. It's like, first of all, they'll put their hands out when they're first in the wheelchair as though they're kind of guiding you along the way. I don't know, maybe there's a fear you're going to run them into a wall. And I mean, there were a couple of times when I sort of did that, not on purpose, when I was first getting used to pushing, them around in the chair. And I used to have to say to my father and to my mother all the time, Mom, Dad, keep your limbs in. Sort of like what you'd say to a kid, do not hang out of that window in the car. Another one will come by and it'll decapitate you. Okay? But the other thing that my mother will do too is she doesn't like the footrests that come with the wheelchair. And to be honest about it, the staff don't really like those on the chairs either, because they like them to be able to put their feet on the floor and sort of propel themselves along under their own steam. It's a little form of exercise. Well, my mother doesn't do that. But what she would do, and this has happened to me, is she's wearing shoes that have non-slip soles on them, right? So she won't go for a tumble when she used to use her legs to walk. She had a tendency in the early days to, just as you're pushing her along down a hallway or something, she'd suddenly put her feet on the floor. Rubber would stick, chair would tip over, bye-bye. You're like, whoop, kind of a deal. Like if you're in a car and suddenly someone brakes, boom. Only in the case of a wheelchair, it's very easy to dump them out. Now, I never actually ever dumped my mother out of the chair, but I came close a couple of times. Same thing happened with my dad. He did the same thing. I don't know, maybe that's something that happens to you when you get to the stage where you're in a wheelchair until you get used to it. So anyways, back to her elbow, I could see my mother, her arm hanging on over the edge of the armrest kind of a thing, and bang, the door arches aren't that wide, and if somebody's pushing them, doesn't think about it, or gets a little to one side or whatever, yeah, Not major. Just a little boo-boo. But anyways, I appreciated the call. So, and that's what I'll probably say to my mother. Mom, how many times have I told you, keep all limbs inside the wheelchair? And she'll go, well, I know, but I just don't know what happened. Okay, Mom, you're okay. We had a craft and chat session. We have this the first Wednesday of every month. I think everybody had a good time that were there. We just work on whatever projects we're working on and we chat. Talk about the projects, talk about other things. Sometimes we don't talk at all. We just get so involved in our projects we're working away. But the fact is, during craft and chat, you're with other people, even if it is virtual. And I just find it inspiring. It just makes whatever you're working on, it enhances the whole process because you're not alone. So, as I said, the first Wednesday of every month we have that. It's a Zoom thing. I put the link into my show notes in the vlog the week before and in other areas as well. So you're more than welcome to join us. It's very informal. I do not record it. And yeah, no stress, just some fun with other people, working on things we love to work on. So that went over this week. It's also very inspiring because you look at what other people are working on, it gives you ideas as well, as I find. So that takes us to Wally Cooks. What did Wally cook this week? Well, he made cheese bread. So this week on Wally Cooks, what did you... Get your arm out of my camera. What did you make this time? What is this?
Cheese bread.
Cheesy bread. Cool. And what's in it?
Cheese.
What kind of cheese?
It is shredded old cheddar and shredded old mozzarella.
Made by an old man. Yes. Ooh, cheesy bread. Looks good. So, it was delicious. Okay, and the other thing that happened this week, yesterday actually on Sunday, I was on a sewing retreat or day, whatever you want to call it, with the Canadian Men Quilters. This is a group that I joined some time ago on Facebook, and every now and then we have a Zoom retreat. And we had one yesterday, and I enjoy that quite a bit. Walter was part of it as well. And it's just really nice to, well, this will sound sexist, to be women-free. Because, I mean, any other sewing retreats I go to, I'm usually the only man. In this case, it was all men. So it was kind of nice. The organizer of it is talking about when, you know, once we all get vaccinated again against COVID and things go back to normal, whatever that is, we would have a physical retreat. And he's already got a site figured out for this. That sounds good. The earliest we could do this, though, won't be until probably September or into October. Again, it's all pending on getting the vaccine. And right now, it's looking like people like Walter and I, we probably won't have the opportunity to get it until possibly September. Although the discussion yesterday on at the retreat was that because the government is talking about laying this out by decades in age, so, you know, they're doing the healthcare workers and the LTCs first, then it'll be the 80s and up, which are probably part of that LTC thing. Then it'll go to the next decade, 70s and up, and then the next decade, which is my decade, 60s and up. And so they said there's a possibility, if they get their act together, that we could actually get the vaccine, say, about April. That would be nice. The sooner the better. But anyways, nobody knows. And this goes back to what I was saying before about the way our government has been handling the deployment of these vaccines. So anyways, we'll see. But that would be really nice. I do enjoy physical retreats. Whether they're, well, the ones I've been to have all been women. So it'll be really interesting to go to one that's all men. And yeah, so we'll see. Hopefully that will actually happen. Okay, so what's coming up this week? Tonight I have a guild meeting. This is not an executive meeting, so I don't have to do anything. I don't, because I'm secretary, I always have to type madly the minutes for the meeting. Well, I don't have to for this one, so I can just sit back and listen to our speaker. I think the speaker we're having tonight is going to talk about the ergonomics of quilting. In other words, how to keep yourself from getting all cramped up and having pains the next day. And those of you that aren't quilters, you would think, yeah, really? Sewing gives you pain? Yes, it does. Especially when you're quilting. When you're actually quilting, there's a lot of fabric, it's heavy, that you're pushing constantly under that needle. And I find I tense up when I do that, and the next day my shoulders hurt. And then other people, they have problems with their hands and things like that. But there's ways to get around those or to help alleviate those problems. And apparently our guest speaker is an expert in this field and is going to talk all about these little things we can do to keep ourselves from being in pain after we're doing something we love. It's kind of almost like an oxymoron, isn't it? You know, can quilting kill you? Yeah, apparently. So that's tonight. And then, of course, we have our show and share session during that where people show what they've been working on. And that's always interesting as well. I have a quilt. My grandmother's quilt is in that one as well. And yeah, so that's what. And Walter's got the first class in his continuing garment classes that he's been taking for the last, oh geez, now how long? 6 months? Something like that. This is a new session. They broke for the Christmas holidays and now they're starting a new session. And I think he's working on some sort of a sweater that's made from like jersey material and things like that. So he starts that tonight as well. So he'll be upstairs taking his class. I'll be downstairs attending my guild. This is what the new world is like. It's all virtual, isn't it? So that takes us to just about the end of what I had to tell you today. But a final note, I just want my American subscribers to know that my heart goes out to you right now. And I think all Canadians' hearts are probably going out to the Americans right now, given the situation that's happened the last few days at the Capitol with those yahoos. Horrible, horrible thing. Really, it's an embarrassment to say the least. It's threatening to say the most. That orange-headed idiot that's been in power for 4 years has actually made it possible to have a terrorist-style riot at the head of government. Just ridiculous, to say the least. And a few of the American people that were on Stephen and Walter Live yesterday voiced their concerns about that situation and their fears, and rightly so. 10 more days until out with the old and in with a positive new. But what will he do? What will Trump do in those 10 days? I mean, every time we think he's done the most he can do, the most ridiculous things, he ups his game and does something even more outlandish. So I think it's going to be an interesting week, to say the least, from a news point of view, but our hearts do go out to you. You are our closest neighbor. And although as a civilization, there is much that we and people around the world criticize Americans for, I don't think anybody wishes this on the American people. Not at all. So have hope. There is a light at the end of the tunnel for sure with Biden. And once that orange piece of crap is kicked completely out, then I think maybe Americans can get into the healing process, because it's been a big wound that Trump has inflicted on the American people. So hopefully Biden will be able to help heal that and heal it quickly. So that's all I want to say for this week. And as always, stay happy, stay healthy, stay in, and we'll see you next week. Bye-bye for now.